This portion of the podcast is brought to you by BetUS, which is open to all of our listeners in the US and Canada. So the sports betting season is in full force with obviously MMA, NHL, NBA and all that. Fast approaching. I saw the NFL started last week as well. So you need a sports book.
My Minnesota Vikings are already losing in overtime, spectacularly as usual.
Yeah, I heard my Green Bay Packers are as well, although I haven't been following much.
Well, they got a hammering. Yeah, they got a real hammering. But the Vikings like to lose just about, just to give you that hope until the last second.
I know that. I think both of us know that throughout our years of sports fandom. But anyway, the integrity of the sports book like BetUS is where you should go. You may already know this, but BetUS has been pioneers in the sports book industry for almost 3 decades, thriving and paying their loyal customer base. It's betus.com and they have loads of bonuses. Join now or call 800-69-BET-US. That is 800-MY-BET-US. You'll receive 125% sign-up bonus by using the code SEVEREMMA, or if you go to severemma.com/BETUS, it'll take you right there as well. They have re-up and referral bonuses also. BetUS is known as America's favourite sportsbook for a lot of reasons. BetUS has you covered for, as I mentioned, for NBA, NHL, team and player props, loads of NFL futures and NFL odds as well. They're already up, and you can bet with UFC matches. You can bet Bellator. You can bet the golf. I know the Ryder Cup is coming up, and I'm sure they'll be all over that. You can do live betting in play and all that. More sports. You can do the casino, and you could do the race book and all of that. So they have every type of bet imaginable, and the sharp bet is to bet with BetUS. So follow my lead and get to your phone, online and socials. Start betting with the betting partner that has integrity and longevity. BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. Use the promo code SEVEREMMA. Go to severemma.com/BetUS. Bet with the 3-decade leader, BetUS. Right, Graham, UFC 266 this week. We'll be doing our betting show during the week as well. We also brought to you by BetUS, and it'll be free for everyone this week, thanks to our friends over at BetUS. And bet responsibly as well, as we always say on the betting show.
Never bet what you can't afford to lose.
Exactly.
Keep it fun. Keep it fun.
100%. But this UFC 266 card, I won't lie, I did a load of tape study for this. I haven't been doing as much of it lately, to be honest. But I watched a lot of fights for the.
Were you trying to figure out who the people on the prelims are?
No, honestly, I did it mostly for the top 2/3 fights, because like the prelims these days. I think actually the prelims is funny because we see them more often. Lots of guys like Dashvili, we've seen a lot of him over the last while, and Moraes, we've seen a lot of him over the last while, and Blades and Rosenstruck. It's like, and even if there's like 6 or 8 months between their fights, it's like, well, it's pretty fresh in the mind. And with a card like this as well, especially, I think there are names on it that we kind of know. A lot of these undercards, like, you wouldn't have an Ashvili, you wouldn't have a Moraes, you wouldn't have an Andrade, you wouldn't have even a Abdurrahimov, who, like, he's fought in a few main events and stuff, or Roxanne, Ferry. Like, it has a lot of known entities, I feel like, in this card, and especially
yeah,
the top
I agree
two.
with you, but I think it has maybe 3-4 fights too many. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does.
Just like having 14-15 fights, I don't think it's necessary. I don't know why. Like, obviously they're trying to fill TV time and stuff, but these cards would feel much less like a drag. And I don't know, I think 10 or 11 is pretty perfect, but these 14-15 fight cards with the first couple of fights with guys that you don't really know, I don't know. I preferred back in the day when the UFC was stacked top to bottom. But
yeah, like, even, we have a lot of Dana White Contender Series shows these days in terms of us on Saturday nights. Even if they could do where the pay-per-views didn't have those unnecessary fights, and like, I know they want to get people into the pay-per-views, but they have, like, if you look at this card, they have fights to get people into the pay-per-views. I know Dan Hooker, I don't know actually if that fight is happening yet, because he's still looking for his visa and everything. Maybe overnight here, recording this in the morning, maybe that's been sorted, and it's actually a day early as well, so hopefully it will have been sorted by them. But even, like, if Moraes versus Dashvili was number one on it, which I think it is actually at the moment, but there are some good fights, and even if you needed to move one down or change it or anything to get people in, there are lots of fights there, and you don't need those other ones. And I know the UFC has so many fighters now and so many gaps to fill, but I think it's funny, like Dana White, and this is a discussion maybe for another day, but Dana White talked about like getting as many guys as he can on the roster, so that spots can be filled because of the pandemic and because it's harder to get people to fight now. But what he's had and what he's come up with is actually more fighters than he actually needs. Like, look at this card. This is a fan-fucking-tastic card, and there's like probably a couple of fighters on it on the underneath that you don't really need on the card. Like the say the fight between Uras Medic, who's a good fighter, and Jalen Turner as well. That probably doesn't need to be on it. Schmellisberger versus Sana probably doesn't need to be on it, and you could probably say maybe one or two more as well. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about those fighters or anything like that, but I think them being on another card and this one being shorter would probably benefit everyone. But however, let's get to the main event, because that's a really one I want to talk about. And I watched a good bit of Volkanovski and a good bit of Ortega last night, and one thing I thought in the Ortega versus the Korean Zombie fight, which is the fight he came back, where he was bald and he was this newfound striker and everything. After watching Volkanovski, so I watched the Volkanovski fights first. I watched him against Chad Mendes and I watched him against Holloway for 3 or 4 rounds of that fight, of each of the fights. And I just watching Ortega, he didn't look as good, I think, as I'd probably if I'd watched Ortega first.
Or Volkanovski?
Ortega. I think if I'd watched Ortega first, I would have thought he looked brilliant. But after watching Volkanovski, I was like, he's actually not. He's good. Don't get me wrong, and he looked better than ever. But come putting him up against Volkanovski, he didn't look as fluid in his movement. Now, he looked sharp and he looked technically very good, and he looked big and long, and to do that to the Korean Zombie is very, very tough. But it was more of like a methodical kind of slow picking apart than what Volkanovski does. He does it like at full pace in terms of, maybe not full pace in terms of throwing shots and everything, but his movement and just his ability to avoid stuff. Like, and look, that's bringing down Ortega maybe a little bit there, but I think Volkanovski is just so good. Like, watching him, I don't know whether you would agree or not, or whether people would agree with me listening to this, but watching the Chad Mendes fight, maybe he would disagree with it, definitely, but watching the Max Holloway fights, I feel like Volkanovski is like a modern day defensive fighter, and I don't mean that in any bad way whatsoever. Like Dominic Cruz, I think, was a very good defensive fighter, and we've spoken about that before, while also being, exciting and a brilliant fighter. I think Volkanovski builds his whole game on not being hit, which is a smart way to do it. But I think, like, you see someone like an Adesanya, who's obviously in the same gym and everything, and his feints and his movement are all down to kind of get a guy to move so he can counter him, but also to bamboozle him into not hitting him. I think Volkanovski is almost totally to bamboozle him into not hitting him, because he doesn't set up his shots as much with the feints as someone like Adesanya does. He actually just comes in and throws you shots when he's throwing them, or counters someone. But when someone is like up against him and look like they're going to attack, he's moving all the time and making himself such what's the opposite of static, like on a moving target, that it's so fucking hard to hit. It's actually
elusive. Yeah,
elusive. He's so elusive. What have you thought of his game over the last while? And like watching him, a good bit of, he's such a good fighter, like, really, and it's hard to see how good he is, really, I think.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this before. He's like kind of flying under the radar, even though he's got these huge wins and he's got the belt, and you know what I mean. And his performances are so good. I don't know if it's I don't think he lacks personality. Like, he's maybe not be the biggest personality in the sport, but I don't know what the problem is, why he hasn't kind of caught on.
Maybe it's because Max is so liked.
Yeah, but he went out there against Max, and he looked phenomenal. So you thought that would have kind of bit of the respect or bit of the kind of support would have rubbed off there, but it doesn't seem to have to. It doesn't seem to have. I think he's a massively underrated fighter. He's one of the best fighters in the world, and he's never really talked about. Obviously, Brian Ortega is a very dangerous fighter, as you mentioned. He's improved on the feet. He's trying to do it a bit more on the feet, but he's obviously at his most dangerous in submissions, and Volkanovski will have to be aware of that, but I'm sure he will be. He's very defensively responsible and seems to be able to stick to a game plan very well as well, which is another big trait you have to have or most champions have anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I think I don't know why he doesn't really get the respect he deserves.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Like, watching him, he's such a brilliant fighter. Now, I also went back and I mentioned that Chad Mendes fight, and I was actually looking for fights where he was taken down, and he was taken down against Chad Mendes. Very hard to hold down. Like, I think he was a prop forward in rugby before, so he's probably good at getting out of situations like that. But I think if Ortega is to challenge him, like, I think. I think on the feet, Ortega is very good, and he's jabs and he's long. The thing about Volkanovski is, though, as well, and I was surprised to see it last night, he actually has a longer reach than Max Holloway. He's a small, squat guy, but he's long arms. You can see the way he throws that left hook. Now, I think Ortega probably will be a little bit longer than him, but I think that's a real benefit for Volkanovski with those big, long arms. That actually his size doesn't hurt him as much as it would most people that size. But I do think Ortega will be trying to keep him at the end of that jab. In the fight against the Korean Zombie, he was changing, but he was fighting predominantly as a southpaw. He did start a bit slow on that fight, and I think Volkanovski maybe starts a little bit slow as well and works their way into it. So this could be a fight where there's, the first couple of rounds could be very, very close, and it's one of those ones where, it tends to happen with Volkanovski fights as well. We get to the end of it and like, who the fuck won that? But I think what the difference between Volkanovski and Ortega on the feet, and I'll get to the ground in a second. I think Volkanovski throws like, and this is kind of going against what I said earlier, but Volkanovski throws like more technical power shots, whereas in the Korean Zombie fight anyway, Ortega attempted to throw like big things. He was throwing spinning elbows, and he was throwing front kicks up the middle, and he throws things to try to knock you out in kind of a more flashy way, whereas Volkanovski is like that. Until that left hook, I keep mentioning it, it's really, really good, and I think that might be the shot for him. But as I mentioned with the looking for fights where he was taken down, Chad Mendes did take him down. He took the back at one stage as well, and Volkanovski did do a good job of getting up. But I wonder if Ortega's wrestling is something he has worked on, like he's worked on his striking coming into the last fight. Because we look at someone like Ortega and how much he has changed between his last fight and these two fights ago and the last fight, and wondering, like, my wonder is, can he do something like that again with a different part of his game? And if he has done that with his wrestling, his jiu-jitsu is unbelievable. And we've seen Volkanovski, and I always harken back to the Justin Gaethje Habib fight. It's like, is there an area in some people's games, like, is Volkanovski a great jiu-jitsu artist? Like, we've seen bits and pieces of it, and I'm sure he's very good, but like, I always wonder, is there a part lacking? Like, and it's sometimes we're too easy to say everyone is truly well-rounded and everyone is great in every area. But we've seen Ortega's jiu-jitsu and his ability to finish there, and he is brilliant. And can Volkanovski live with that if Ortega's wrestling is improved and he can get him to the ground? Ortega, against the Korean Zombie, he kept jawing for the knee, kind of as if he was going to take him down, but didn't really, maybe a couple of times. But I wonder if he lulls Volkanovski into a striking match, which Volkanovski wants, so he's not really lulling him into it, but you know what I mean? But everyone's thinking, right, this is striking, and then he gets a takedown, timing the takedown.
Yeah,
that could
be. I think he'll need to have some success. If he tries to lull for too long, Volkanovski will get into his rhythm and start picking him apart, and there'll be no takedowns available. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a tricky one. But he doesn't necessarily even need a takedown. We've seen him with some guillotines and things like that. You know what I mean? Or obviously T-City triangles off his back and all that stuff when he first came into the UFC. So it's he's definitely been working on his striking, and if his striking's improved, it'll definitely improve his chances of getting in on takedowns. Yeah. But I see Volkanovski having a big enough striking advantage here that maybe it'll be difficult to get inside. But it only takes one mistake from Volkanovski to get taken down, and then we know how dangerous Brian Ortega is on the ground. Yeah, 100%. Like, Ortega is the type of guy as well. I think that he's, as you mentioned, he's always dangerous, but he does kind of
cut up and he bruise up and stuff on his face, and he takes the damage very badly. And I'm sure jiu-jitsu people will tell you, or MMA people who do jiu-jitsu will tell you, the bloodier it gets and the sweatier it gets, the harder it is to get those submissions as well. So maybe playing the longer game isn't as as smart, or maybe isn't the right way to go. But it's I think against, as you mentioned, against Ortega, it's probably tough not to play the long game, because he is so good. But yeah, I do think this is going to be 5 rounds, to be honest. I think it's going to go to a decision. Now, both guys can hit hard, and Ortega's jiu-jitsu obviously is elite, and if he gets that chance, I absolutely could see him submitting him without a shadow of a doubt. But I'm very interested to see what we see new from Ortega, and will it be enough? Like, if you see their careers so far, I would agree with you. I would be picking Volkanovski here, and we'll give our official picks on the betting show during the week. But I just think his defensive ability is too good. I think he hits way more often with hard shots than he gets hit himself, and he will be even more safe, I think, and more defensive against Ortega, not to get put on the ground, and if he can do that, if he can stay on the feet for 5 rounds, I think he'll win the decision. But I definitely wouldn't be ruling Ortega out. I think it's going to be a fascinating striking battle here. I think it's going to be a fascinating technical battle and tactical battle, and maybe one that would have been better off with no fans, to be honest, because I feel like there could be a few boos here if it goes like 2 rounds and neither of them have really landed anything big, or there's a lot of looking at each other and stuff, which is is something that's not always about. I was talking to Harry Powell the other day about it on the podcast, and we were like talking about how MMA at the top level now, or I made a point anyway, it's a little bit more boring than it was before, basically because the technique is so good and these lads have more respect for each other, and boring in like an entertainment way, not in a technically adept way. And us, we would like it. I'm sure all people listening to this would like it as well. But I don't think it's going to be a rock'em sock'em robot sort of fight. Now maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. But but still, having said that, I think it'll be a good technical fight, and I do see Volko winning that one. But what a fight!
Another thing I think is, if you look at the kind of strength of schedule that Volkanovski's been on, he obviously Ortega did fight Holloway, but he got finished in that fight. And his only win since then, nearly 3 years ago, is the Korean Zombie. And obviously that's a good win, but, Volkanovski's been out there beating Max Holloway twice, Jose Aldo, Mendez, so I think his strength of opponent, and the fact that he's been in 5-round fights and gone the distance in 3 of them, or three of his last 3 fights, that he's like, it is like, Brian Ortega is well-rounded guy, and his cardio isn't a problem. But when you're going 5 rounds at a pace that Volkanovski is trying to set, it could become a problem. Yeah,
100%. And he's had a good break as well. I think like he fought Max Holloway, and then 6 months before that he fought Holloway again, and around 6 or 7 months before that he fought Aldo, and then 6 months before that he fought Mendez. So he's had fight after fight after fight, and Darren Elkins before that is never an easy fight as well.
Against the who's who of the featherweight division as well. So
I think like getting a year off. He's had 14 months now between the last Max Holloway fight and this. Obviously, they're supposed to fight in the middle, but they did tough and everything like that. It's probably not the worst thing in the world for him, and I know that he was carrying a few injuries and stuff, but to get that clear, to get that out the way, there might be a little bit of ring rust for both of them here. Absolutely, I wouldn't rule that out at all. But I think the break here will be good for Volkanovski, because Ortega's kind of already had the break in his career where he came back and he looked different. But look, it's a great fight, and I can't.
You mean the drugs ban?
No. He had.
Oh, okay.
I don't mean the drugs ban. No, why he did it?
Never mind.
What did he get banned for? Was it weed, or what did he do? I don't know. I can't remember.
No, I think it was some kind of steroid or something. No,
was it? Oh yeah. He's fought against who was it? Mike De La Toro was a no contest. Is that the one? Sure. Look, Graham. Everyone's on steroids, as a famous man once said, and which we will get to in a second. But first of all, let's talk about Valentina Shevchenko versus Lauren Murphy. Look, it's one of these ones where it's hard to talk up Lauren Murphy in terms of her chances here. Look, she's a good fighter. She closes the distance well. She lands nice shots in the clinch. She's very strong. She uses her strength to get nice takedowns. She's good jiu-jitsu and ground and pound. She never stops moving on the feet. She throws lovely 1-2s down through the middle, and I really like her left hook. But watching her and then watching Shevchenko, it's like a different a different realm of fighter altogether, just a different league of fighter completely. Like, Shevchenko does everything so much quicker. Her elbows inside in the clinch are just brilliant. She's on her toes non-stop, throwing high kicks. When you do get inside, you try to clinch with her, she just trips you and smashes your head right into the fucking canvas. And in her ground and pound is unbelievable. She has submissions as well on the ground. And I just cannot see a way that Lauren Murphy beats her unless she slips in a banana peel or, you know, something mad happens, there's an injury. There's just very little percentage of Murphy.
And it's another one where, you know, Lauren Murphy's really tough. She can take a lot of shots and keep coming forward. She's never been finished, but, like, you know, that could be a problem here. Maybe, you know, there might come a stage where the ref needs to call it off on the feet, or the corner needs to throw it in. Throw the towel in. That's the kind of scenario I'm seeing here.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Yeah, like, I think, you know what, I would agree with that, but I actually do think, I'll save my bet for the bet show, but I think Shevchenko is going to finish her without too much damage. No, I'll say I think she's going to submit her, like, because I think Murphy will try to get the fight to the clinch. I think she's an intelligent fighter, Murphy, and I think if you're an intelligent fighter, you do not fight Valentina Shevchenko out in the open. Like, Murphy's best chance here is to get her in the clinch, be stronger than her, and take the fight to the ground. Now, I don't think she is stronger than her, even though she is very strong, but Shevchenko's technique and her ability there is just too much. I think she will put her on the ground and submit her. Like, she could ground upon her, she could beat her that way, but I think Shevchenko over the last while has kind of stopped giving a fuck about going long and stopped giving a fuck about, like, respecting these people. And look, Jennifer Maia came out and she put on a good first round against her and made her kind of respect her, and that went to a decision. But, like, she finished Jessica Andrade, she finished Caitlin Chu Kagan. Okay, she went to the decision with Carmouche, but she knocked out Jessica Ai. She has definitely, I think, been upping her kind of her madness in the cage, if you want to put it that way, and her finishing ability. And I think she will see someone like Murphy, and look, with all due respect, she's not on her level, and I think Shevchenko will know that. And look, that's a dangerous game in MMA as well, if you don't think someone is on your level. But I just don't think Murphy has anything. And look, I could be proven completely wrong here. I hope for Lauren Murphy's sake that she puts up a good fight. And if she wins, she wins. Fair play to her. She absolutely deserves it. But it's very hard to see a way. And I think for Murphy, when it is hard to see a way, when there's nowhere like completely dangerous for Murphy, I think she will open up, and I think she will end up getting the finish here inside the distance. But it's just another one in the ledger, really, for Valentina Shevchenko. That's how I'm looking at it. But Murphy does deserve the fight. She's got some very good wins over the last while. She beat Calderwood, beat Shakirova, Ferry, Lee, Borella. So she's 5 wins in a row now. So you can't deny her at this stage, and I'm glad she's getting the shot. But I don't think it's going to be a successful one for her, unfortunately. And Irish MMA won't have another UFC champion, unluckily. But anyway, Robbie Lawler, Nick Diaz, Graham. I know you're a big fan of the Diaz brothers down through the years. You looking forward to seeing Nick back?
Yeah, it's good he got that lifetime ban for a bit of weed overturned a few years back. Anyway.
That should have been held up. That demon weed.
Oh, God. Yeah, so, I've always been a big fan of Nick Diaz and loved the Diaz brothers throughout the years. But it's been in a month's time, it'll be 10 years since Nick Diaz last won an MMA fight. Mm-hmm. That's a long fucking time. And okay, he fought against Anderson Silva, nearly 6.5 years ago, like 7 years ago. It's a long fucking time. He hasn't been in the gym all that time. We've seen from if you follow him on social media, he's in and out of clubs every weekend and weekdays for a lot of those years. I think, obviously Robbie Lawler is not the fighter he used to be. And obviously Diaz has a win over him from a long time ago when they were both teenagers or in the very early stages of their careers. But Robbie Lawler's on a 4-fight skid here since he beat Donald Cerrone, but he's been fighting, he's been fighting high level competition. I think it's hard to pick Nick Diaz in this fight. It's hard to know how he's going to look. It's his timing. He's probably in great shape because like when he is in camp and when he is training and doing triathlons and all that stuff, he does get into great shape. But it's 10 years since your last win, and you're coming in here against a guy who's like a former champion and been fighting regularly while you've been out. I think this is a very, very tough ask.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Like, I think the thing about Diaz, okay, he was partying, he was in Vegas all the time, but I also think like he didn't balloon up hugely as well. So I think he probably was doing like a little bit of training, maybe even on and off for a couple of weeks or a couple of months at a time over the year. So like, if there was just a guy who was completely...
Was he developing his skills in the gym? I don't think so.
I would agree with that. But the 5-round thing, I think, is interesting because you think a guy who's been out of the cage and fucking drinking and messing for 5 years or 6 years, whatever it was.
Oh, he would have wanted that. He would have wanted that.
But you'd think someone who has been doing that and would not want 5 rounds. You think they'd want a shorter fight. But amazing, he must know. Like, these Diaz brothers are not stupid, and he must know that he was in some sort of shape. But also, the thing about Nick is this comeback has been talked about for 2 years now nearly. So even if he was out of shape and in terrible shape, he's had a long time to get back into shape. I remember those pictures came out about a year ago where he looked in phenomenal shape. So, I think I think we can kind of write that off a little bit in terms of like what physical state he look at, but as you mentioned, the technical kind of shape or the game moves along very quickly. It really does. And as you said, Robbie Lawler has been fighting a top level guys, and I watched his last fight against Neil Magny yesterday, and okay, Neil Magny won the fight and he wrestled him around the place, but Robbie Lawler didn't look like shot or anything. Like, he didn't look like the old Robbie Lawler. I think the prime Robbie Lawler would have beaten Neil Magny and beaten most of the other guys he fought as well. But Robbie Lawler, he is not the prime Robbie Lawler, as I mentioned, but he is closer to his fighting best than Nick Diaz is. Like, Nick Diaz is a decade out from it at least, whereas Robbie Lawler was, in that decade, in 2014, I think it was, he won the championship, and that's okay, 7 years ago, but he has been fighting at a pretty high level until last year. So I think, Lawler is the pick here. I think you have to go with Lawler. It's just I feel like Nick Diaz will be trying to drag Robbie Lawler 5 rounds and hope he tires. But Lawler over the years has shown that that's not the case with him, anymore. He went 5 rounds with Colby in 2019. Went all 3 rounds with Neil Magny last year as well. So it's not as if Robbie Lawler is some spent force in terms of his cardiovascular ability. No, he mightn't be a championship level fighter anymore, but I just, it's very hard for me to see Nick Diaz being sharp enough, technically good enough in this day and age to live with someone like Robbie Lawler, who is training in Sanford MMA now as well, I believe, with all those killers that we mentioned in the last couple of weeks. And I think as well, if you're someone like Diaz, right, who hasn't really been in the gym or taking punches for the last decade, and I'm sure he has been, as I mentioned, for the last 2 years, but there is only so much. You hear fighters talking about it all the time. There's only so much you can do in the gym, and having fights and being in fights is very different from that. And if Robbie Lawler's coming in hitting you, and Robbie Lawler, the power is last thing to go. If he hits you hard and he brings that pace onto you that he does, in terms of, maybe not a pace in terms of like loads of shots like a Diaz would throw, but the pace in terms of like juggernaut sort of bang, 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 6 or 7 hard shots around. That's a very hard thing to live with when you're not used to it in the short term. Now, Nick Diaz obviously is used to it in the long term. He's a legend of the sport and everything like that. But for this fight particularly, it's going to be tough for him. But like, two legends, myself and Ian did a podcast over on Patreon about Nick Diaz and kind of talked about his career and how good he was and everything like that. I just kind of hope for this fight more than anything. I'd be interested in think what you think, Graham. I hope Nick Diaz looks good. Like, I hope we don't have an Evander Holyfield in our hands here, and I don't think we will, but Nick Diaz isn't 70 years old or anything like that, but I hope he looks good.
I can see him starting off looking off, his timing being off, but kind of growing into the fight as he kind of always did anyway. Obviously, as you mentioned, Robbie Lawler's got big power, but maybe a positive of, not really fighting very much in the last 10 years is that your chin, and already Iron Chin has had a bit of time to rest. So maybe if Diaz can make this a high paced fight and make it a dirty fight, he can turn it on late. But I think it's a lot to ask, Robbie Lawler, obviously, as I mentioned, has been, even though he hasn't been winning regularly, he's been active against top guys, and his timing will be correct. And Nick Diaz is, like, we kind of saw Nate after a lesser timeout kind of come back, and his timing be off at the start and kind of grow into the fight. I know they're not the same guy, but they do have, they're the nearest kind of
absolutely similar style,
fighting style. Yeah, they kind of do a very similar thing in a lot of ways. So maybe he can do the Terminator thing and just take the shots and tire out Robbie, and I'm sure that'll be he'll be preparing as if he's going to go 5 rounds. Diaz doesn't really have the knockout power, doesn't even really throw with knockout power, throws with 70-80% or sometimes even less. So maybe Nick Diaz's style isn't the worst for this kind of a layoff, but it's still a huge ask, I think.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward, and as I said, I just hope he looks good, and I hope we have a competitive fighter, because there'd be nothing worse than Robbie Lawler coming in knocking Nick Diaz out after 2 minutes when Diaz looks terrible. That would just be very disappointing, I think, for everyone involved. But however, I think
you don't know how many fights Nick Diaz has left on his contract, or if he signed a new contract or anything.
I'm not sure. Hard to know. Yeah.
If he wins here, he'd probably end up calling out Jake Paul, going after that money.
I don't know. He could end up calling out McGregor. GSP probably. He'd call out
a lot more money in the Jake Paul probably. For Nick Diaz.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that fucking idiot. Anyway, other fights on this card. Curtis Blades coming off of a loss against who did he lose against? Derek Lewis. He's fighting Jairzinho Rosenstruck, and we know what's going to happen there. Jairzinho's going to be trying to strike it, and Blades is going to be trying to take him down. I don't think he'll be making the same mistake he made against Lewis, giving him some time on the feet, but also diving into a takedown that Lewis had kind of set up before getting knocked out. So I would fancy Blades to win that one, but I think that's a fun fight. Andrade versus Calvillo, that's a big fight in that 125-pound division. I know both have had losses there recently. Obviously, Andrade lost to Shevchenko in a title fight, but especially for Calvillo, I think if she wins this, she could be next in line. There aren't that many clear contenders there. Lauren Murphy beat Jojo Calderwood in her last fight, and they were probably the two at the time. I'm sure someone else maybe has emerged or will emerge. I'm not looking at it at the moment, but that's, when you ever see Andrade in a fight at 125 and Calvillo as well, after both of them moved divisions, it's always it always has title ramifications, I suppose, in it. Who'd you fancy in those, Graham? I fancy Blades and Andrade to win that, but what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think Blades will be able to get the takedowns he needs, and obviously he's more well-rounded and just an all-round better fighter. And I think with Andrade, I think she's improved a lot over the years, and I think Calvillo might be a little bit overrated. I think, Andrade should have her way here with Calvillo.
I like Calvillo, but I maybe agree. I think she's a very, very good fighter, but I think Andrade is just maybe that next level, and the only one. There's kind of a gap between 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in that division. Andrade to me is number 2, but we'll see. Moraes against Dashvili is a very interesting fight, I feel like, because Marlon Moraes loves fighting wrestlers. He loves coming in and landing big shots and big knockout blows, but he also is the type of guy that, if the fight goes against him, it'll go against him very quickly. And I feel like Moraes needs to start well here. He needs to come out and he needs to make Dashvili pay for everything he does and try to knock him out immediately. And if he doesn't, well, he doesn't. But I think Dashvili will know that. He'll be very careful. And, I think Dashvili, this is a great matchup for him. I think it's a very winnable fight and it's a good name and everything. I don't believe in his skills as much as other people do. I think when he comes up against someone very, very good, I think he will end up losing to them. But Moraes, he might be catching him at the right time of his career. Moraes has looked a little bit gun shy recently, and if he is that again here, Dashvili will have a very, very easy night. But
he's coming off 2 knockouts as well, like against him, Moraes, and being gun shy, kind of it's kind of understandable. But I think it's a good matchup. Like you could see it going both ways, but I do think Moraes is maybe on the downturn of his career.
Yeah, like a year ago, 2 years ago, I definitely would have picked Moraes, but now I probably just lean for Dashvili. But it should be it's an interesting one. Dan Hooker against Preston. This is very interesting as well. Hopefully by the time this is released, we'll record this, as I said, a day early, but Hooker is looking for a visa at the moment. I don't know where he got it. And Preston as well, very unfortunately, his mother died over the last couple of weeks, so it's so much turmoil for both of these guys coming in here. But if we look at the fight by itself and leave that aside maybe for a second, I think it's a very, very fun fight. Anyone listening to this podcast knows I'm a big fan of Haqparast's ability, and Hooker obviously is a very, very good fighter as well. But I think this one,
it's a big step up as well, though, isn't it?
It is a big step up. But this is Rock'em Sock'em Robots written all over it. I think there's blood in this fight. I think it's long drawn out battle if it happens, and I can't wait to see this one. My head is telling me Haqparast is going to win, but my head is often wrong.
I'd probably just lean the other way slightly, but this is a really tough one to pick. It's as you said, it's a step up, so there is questions that need to be answered against like an opponent like Dan Hooker. We kind of know where Dan Hooker is and what he can do, and we kind of we're kind of waiting on Nasrat to kind of show us, but he can only beat what's in front of him, and he's done that. But I'd probably lean with the known quantity here slightly, but I wouldn't be too confident.
Yeah, it's a good fight anyway, and look, hopefully it goes down. It should be fun. Big step up as well for Chris Dawkins, who's been doing good things in the heavyweight division, fighting Shamil Abdurrahimov. So if he can win that, he'll be on the trajectory with the likes of Tom Aspinall, and I could see them meeting pretty soon as well. So it's a good fight for him. And look, for Shami, he's always thereabouts as well, so fair play to him. Roxanne Ferry back against Talia Santos. Mano Firo, who was amazingly up for like a female fighter of the year. I don't know why. She's a good fighter, like, don't get me wrong, but still relatively young in her career. But look, 225 pound fights with the title up for grabs. If someone could stand out, and look at Talia Santos especially. She's 17-1 now in her career, fighting Roxanne Modafferi. And we know Roxy, if you get a win over her, she's beaten Gillian Robertson in her last fight, beat Molly McCann very impressively before that. So yeah, she's a very, very good fighter, and she will be hoping to take that next step, and same for the other two ladies on that as well. And then we the couple of fights you mentioned earlier, Carl Robertson. There's 4 more fights after that against Nick Maximov, Medic against Turner, Schmellisberger against Sano, and Omar Morales against Jonathan Pierce. So all in all, how many fights is that, Graham? That's 14 fights, Jesus.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fights.
Back the Facebook prelims.
They want to fucking hell UFC on FX, but it's should be fun, and I'm looking forward to the card. Also, let's mention as well, I know we did a podcast on it over on Patreon, but there was some great wins for Irish guys last week as well. Will Fleury got a good win, Palahan got a good win, Takamandu got a good
Palahan.
Win. Yeah, I haven't managed to see the fight yet because Combat Check Global are like they'll do whatever they want basically. But I watched the Takamandu fight, and we mentioned on that podcast, but he looked like he has a base that he can build very well from. He looked like a very confident striker. Team KF start the fighter, and they talked about him. Looking at John Jones in the early parts of his career, and you could see like he has that lint, and he tries to fight like him and everything like that. So I think his head movement and his defense could improve a little bit, but it's the first fight, obviously, and everything can improve.
Yeah, and he's in there against an experienced guy who's fought the champion and to a decision. This guy's been there, done that. So for a first pro fight, that's an impressive win, and there's obviously things to go back and train, but that's to be expected as you're making your way as a young pro. Yeah,
100%. And I know Ian O'Neill watched the Palahan fight and said it was an absolute war. So Pal's come through 3 big fights now so far and won all 3, and he's a top.
You wouldn't want to be getting in a war every time.
No, and I think Liam O'Griffin said that to Ian as well, and he had mentioned on the podcast, and that's 100% correct. But I would love to see Pano maybe come back and get a few fights in Cage Warriors or something like that, and go to that next level and go towards the UFC. And I'm sure maybe he'll get a few more fights in combatches. But I wouldn't trust him as much as I trust Ian Dean to bring a guy's career on, if you know what I mean. So,
well, even looking at all the Irish guys who kind of go abroad, you're kind of just have to take what fight you get. Like I'm sure Chris Fields and the team would have preferred, somebody maybe a little bit less experienced for a first pro fight, because there is a lot of pressure on yourself. You're like, this is your life, this is your everything. Like when you're an MMA fighter, so somebody like Ian Dean, as you mentioned, or will kind of take that into account a little bit more. It seems like some of these other promotions are just throw them in there.
Yeah, indeed. It's very true. And funny we mentioned Cage Warriors, Will Fleury having fought at the last weekend as well. He and he dominated. Apparently, I didn't see the fight, but one of the lads saw it and they mentioned on the podcast, and they gave a good account of it. But he dominated that fight from start to finish. And he did an interview with Ian the week before, and he said like that he would love to go to Cage Warriors, but the politics is kind of stopping it, which is very interesting now. And it's a bit sad in a way, isn't it? Because look, we've talked about it before, and with the whole
legendary moments with Irish fighters on Cage Warriors throughout the years, like real cornerstone moments. And obviously there's been problems before between SBG and Cage Warriors, and they've been resolved. So hopefully this can kind of resolve itself again.
Like you can separate. You should be able to separate it. Like if Will Fleury or a Kiefer Crosby or someone like that wants to get into Cage Warriors for 3 or 4 fights, why could we not keep Boylan and Kavanagh separate? They go in, they have the fight, they leave, and they come away. Like I don't know. Maybe that's not possible, and maybe they're they all want to go a different route. But I don't know. I think Cage Warriors would be happy enough to have the SPG fighters. I don't know if the FSPG would want to be in Cage Warriors. Maybe that's a discussion for another day. But I've asked both of parties about it before in interviews. It's been a while now, so maybe the question needs to be asked again. But Will Fleury, you could kind of see it in that interview. He said it himself. He would love to go that route, but it's not possible. And a lot of these lads that did the Bellator thing and got a good bit of money out of it and did well, and I think they're probably like, both of them have said it now, Kiefer Crosby and Will Fleury, and I'm sure there's other fighters thinking the same way. It's like, well, look, Bellator, I want to get to the UFC. Bellator was great, but I want to get to the UFC now, and we know the way to get to the UFC is through Cage Warriors. And look, we mentioned it the last day in the podcast, but Will Fleury is like, if you put Will Fleury into the Cage Warriors middleweight division now, I would be surprised if he wasn't the champion in a couple of fights, to be honest. I think Will Fleury is a very good fighter. And, Ken Kapainen went in there and beat a former challenger. And Will Fleury made mincemeat of him in his last fight.
Yeah. He'd at least be a valuable asset to the Cage Warriors division 100%. And the title picture. And obviously, for him winning, if he could, as you say, go on and win a Cage Warriors title, that'd be huge for him as well. So, as you say, it seems to be mutually beneficial. So hopefully, when it makes business sense, it can be sorted out. Yeah,
and Graham Boylan put out like a statement as well saying that Irish fighters are held back. Now, I don't know if they're connected, but it's funny, the interview came out and then like 6 hours later that statement came out. So I'm not saying they are connected, but like, they think they probably are, but hopefully
people involved in the situation may see them as connected anyway. They may be very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Even if they aren't they are, so. Right, we will leave it there. Thank you, Graham, for joining me. Thank you to Spencer for joining me earlier on as well. And thank you to everybody for listening. And we will leave it at that. We will see you all next week. Sign up patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. Go to manscaped.com. Use the promo code SevereMMA. And go to SevereMMA.com/BetUS as well. It's open to people in the US and Canada. If you're there, so sign up there and get your betting on for UFC 266. We will have the betting show as well during the week, and literally, I think there's 7 shows went up on Patreon last week, so your money's worth in 1 week. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. See you all next time. Good luck.